Yeah, you're funny.
We're doing it! We're doing it!
Hey guys, welcome back to the RV8 Pilot. Another day, just going to do a little flying around. I think I'm going to do a couple RNAV approaches into Poplar Grove. So we used to have a VOR approach into Poplar Grove, but they're going to decommission the Rockford VOR, which is RFD, or Romeo Foxtrot Delta. That's eventually going to be decommissioned, so they built us an RNAV Alpha approach, which RNAV approaches are GPS based for those of you that aren't pilots versus ground based equipment. And although they can have ground based if you're doing WAS, Wide Area Augmented System, I believe that's what that stands for, ground based assistance to the GPS approaches. But either way, the GPS approach uses the satellites to determine our position, and they create a glide path from your altitude right down to the end of the runway based off of GPS signals. So they built us one here. Typically they're designated to the specific runway, but when they're not, if it's going to come in at some different angle, maybe from either direction, they designate them as Alpha and then Bravo and Charlie and so on. So this one technically is an Alpha approach because it's not designated for a specific runway. However, it's lined up with the runway 30 here at Poplar Grove, so it's almost a straight in, maybe just a couple degrees off of the runway heading. But either way, I think I'm going to go ahead and do a couple of those practice approaches to learn more about this airplane and how I'm going to set it up for doing these approaches. So anyways, on my approach plate, I think you can see here, of course we're sitting at the airport there. If I zoom in, there is where our house is, basically in relation to the two grass strips and the asphalt strip. And then you can see the approach plate here as I zoom out. I'm using ForeFlight. For those of you who aren't pilots, this is just an application that's a very popular one.
Traffic 521 November.
And approach plate gives us information that we need for the instrument approach we're going to do to that airport. The approach course, airport elevation. The designation, there it is, RNAV, GPS, dash Alpha at Poplar Grove. Some of the frequencies, the missed approach procedure here, and then it gives you a graphical representation of this. So you can see several approach fixes, or initial approach fixes right there. NIBD there, or Steph. And that's where you will start the approach. If you were to start it from Steph, you would come along and hit Vintage, come down to Donnie, and then to the runway. And same for NIBD, go from there to Vintage, and then to Donnie, and to the runway. Most of these 5-letter identifiers for fixes, you know, they start out, this one, it looked like Donnie to me, could be Downey. You know, some of them are pretty easy, Vintage, but some of them represent places around the area, people around the area, football teams, sports teams, or whatever. So anyways, my plan is to go fly from the airport here. We'll fly around just a little bit, and we'll go direct to NIBD and activate the approach. We'll get to Vintage. It'll turn inbound at 306 degree heading to Downey or Donnie, and then eventually catch the glide path, which is going to give us, actually, excuse me, for Vintage, and then it'll start down Vintage, and then there's the glide path showing you as it descends down to the airport at a 3 degree glide slope, and then we'll do the missed approach. This allows us to go down to a circling minimums of 1,380 feet mean sea level. In this case, it's 523 feet above the ground here at Poplar Grove. Yeah, so we're going to do that. We'll see. We're going to do it with traffic because right now the winds are prevailing for runway 12. That's what the other airplanes are using here. So we'll do that. All right, engine's running, just letting the oil warm up a little bit. And it is, so we'll taxi out. Cooled off again today. I think it's in the mid 30s, 39 degrees Fahrenheit out here, Poplar Grove. trying a new camera angle. You'll see it here with the camera over the left-hand side of the instrument panel. I don't think it's going to record the screens very well. It does really well on other items, but I've noticed on the screens it's got a little bit of a flicker. It doesn't focus as well. I'm sure it has to do with the refresh rate on the screens versus the camera, but I'm going to play around with it, see what we come up with. Unlike like the 310 pilot, you know, their cockpit is pretty large in a 310, so you can get the cameras spaced out and give you a little better view. Here in the RV8, it's a small cockpit tandem, so we get front and back seats, but it's not as wide, so I don't have many places to put angle cameras for different angles. Then we'll play around with it. Trish and I are so excited to start flying again and getting out. We are fair weather. We're fair weather Harley riders. We're fair weather airplane flyers. And everything else. I'm lucky enough, well, both of us are lucky enough we travel a lot. Trish is a corporate event planner. She has her own business, On Point Planning. She does some big contracts with some big companies, and she gets to travel around the world actually doing large incentive programs and conferences. I get to travel, obviously, with United, and we get to areas that during the winter months, it's still green out. Go to Florida and California and places like that where the grass is still green and the flowers are still blooming. Here in Illinois, in the Midwest, Iowa, Nebraska, it's brown out. Looking at the grass, it's all brown. Not very neat to look at. But it sure makes you appreciate it that when it does get green. When the spring starts hitting, everybody starts getting out. They get rid of the 2 NOTAMs, which are now notices to air missions. For those of you that are pilots, used to be notices to airmen, but
final for 1-2 Papa Girl.
yeah, I guess people thought that was inappropriate to say airmen when we got girls flying as well. So now it's air missions. So we have 2 NOTAMs today. Well, here at the airport, the 2 grass runways are closed because they're wet and soft and snow and everything else. They don't want to get them damaged. So in the spring, once it starts drying out, as soon as they can, they'll get rid of those NOTAMs, notices to air missions. Kind of weird to say for me. It's been notices to airmen for a long time for me, 20-something years. But we'll get the runways open, and then everybody will be out flying. Nice thing about United Airlines for me is my seniority in the 737 is really moving up quite a bit, which is nice. Which means I can bid for specific days off, more weekends off, or blocks of days off. So if I want to do some traveling, in in the airplane, I have the ability now to bid for that based off my seniority. So this summer should be good for that. We're going to try to plan a couple trips around Trish's schedule and go somewhere fun a couple times, make some videos. All right, guys, I'm going to do my run up, and we'll be back in just a little bit. All right, we're on the runway 30, or should be 12, powered up 1700 RPM. Everything's in the green.
Typical traffic, system 373 Romeo is 2 miles to the south looking for that traffic.
Papa Grove traffic 8 Mike Foxtrot, just departed runway 12, we're turning to the east, Papa Grove, 2 miles to south.
Lewis, 2 Papa Whiskey turning final, runway 9, Lewis.
Autopilot.
Papa Grove traffic, Grumman
Autopilot
5400
mode.
Lima, departing 12 for closed traffic, Papa Grove.
RPM's back to 2500, boost pump's coming off.
Left crosswind, 12 Papa Grove.
Autopilot mode.
Papa Grove
Approaching
traffic, Tango
altitude.
Romeo's overhead at 17, I'm going to enter midfield downwind. Papa Grove 63
Autopilot
Charlie, left
mode.
crosswind, turning left downwind, 12 Papa Grove.
Alright guys, we're off the ground, turn the autopilot on, we're at 3,000 feet. I'll keep it about 150 knots I suppose, we'll do that.
Driving traffic,
Pull the propeller back to 2300.
6.1 miles away from you, exiting down to runway 9. Contact. Lewis, traffic Scott,
That'll keep about 2400 on the RPM.
Downwind for runway 9, off the RNAV 20, Lewis traffic.
So, I've got the autopilot navigating directly to IPD intersection. I don't know, we'll see if you guys can see that in the screen with the new camera angle. We're flying along the magenta line, we're going to IPD, it's going to make a pretty hard right-hand turn. Come out to Vintage intersection, then make a right-hand turn. We'll cross Downey and then the runway. We'll do a missed approach, which has us, if we look at the missed approach procedure on the foreflight here, it says missed approach, you climbing right-hand turn up to 3,000 feet direct to Vintage intersection and hold. So I'll make that right-hand turn out of runway here, curves around, we'll go back to Vintage intersection and I'll enter this holding pattern. We'll try it like that.
Papa Grove traffic, 70 Romeo, entering left base for 12 Papa Grove. And Papa Grove traffic, Grumman 5400 Lima, left downwind for 12 Papa Grove. Runway 9, Lewis traffic.
So I'll make some I'll make some radio calls as we do this. Keep it in mind, I'm going to be doing a practice instrument approach, and those pilots back there at the airport may only be private pilots. Don't know instrument procedures. So if I tell them, hey, I'm doing the RNAV to RNAV Alpha approaching to Papa Grove, they probably don't have any clue what that means. If I tell them I'm over NIPD intersection, they probably don't have any clue what that means. They might if they're instrument rated, or they just happen to have that chart up. So I will try to make calls in reference to the airport as if I was a VFR pilot as well. So in this case, I'm almost directly east of the airport. We're at 3,000 feet, which is what the minimum altitude on that particular leg once you start initial approach. So my Garmin GTN 625 was flashing, telling me, hey, we're making a right-hand turn at the intersection.
Papa Grove traffic, Grumman 5400 Lima, turning left base for 12 Papa Grove.
Oh, we're about 8 miles or so from the airport. Papa Grove traffic 800 Mike Foxtrot's an RV8. We're about 8 miles to the east of the field doing a practice RNAV Alpha approach into Papa Grove. 3,000 feet.
Papa Grove traffic, 70 Romeo is clear of 12 Papa Grove.
So we'll do this if the guys are...
Papa Grove traffic, Grumman 5400 Lima, is final for 12 Papa Grove.
They're
traffic to the right one. We'll go put in runway 12 to the north, Hopper Grove.
they got the right of way for the runway 12. So if it happens that they're going to be taking off or in the pattern and going to be in my way or I'll be in their way, we'll break the approach off and do it again. They have the right of way, and I'm just doing practicing prevailing winds. Better for 1-2. There you can see we've now joined up on this leg, 3,000 feet. That's what I have. Now, like I said, the minimum altitude on this is 1,300. So I'm going to set my minimums 1,380. I think that's what I said. 1,380 feet is the minimums. That's MSA or mean sea level. I have that set. And I look down here, I can see that Vintage intersection is 5 miles from Downey, and 5.1 from the end of the runway. So 10.1, so we'll just round it to 10. When I get at Vintage for a straight in there, I can announce I'm on a 10-mile final, so that also helps the VFR pilots. Once I cross Vintage intersection and turn inbound, it's telling me right to 306 degrees. Here, I'll be able to activate the VNAV function on the Garmin GTN 625.
11 Golf, you have the pattern? 11 Golf, departing the pattern to the north. Roger, Papa Golf 63 Charlie, turn left cross 112, Papa Golf.
We'll watch for this arrow here to switch inbound. Now I'm going from Vintage to Downey. I'll hit my VNAV button on my autopilot panel. I get altitude 3000 with standby VNAV. My glide slope is right here. Glide path for the approach is here. As that drops down, as we get close to that path, the aircraft will start flying down that path. Papa Grove, traffic 800, Mike Foxtrot, RV8. We're on a 10-mile final for runway 30. Just to practice instrument approach, will be a low approach only. Papa Grove.
There he is a 12, Papa Grove.
I'll stay out of your way, guys. Instrument approach just to 30 this way, but I'll be doing a go-around. So, again, I'm going to hold about 120 knots, leave my flaps up.
Autopilot mode.
All right, there it is. It's switched over to vertical nav. The glide path is coming down. As soon as it gets centered, the aircraft will start descending. I'm going to slow to 120 knots. Fly that down at 120 knots.
Westbound traffic, White Cessna inbound from the southwest, about 10 miles out, coming in to land at runway 06, westbound traffic.
Lewis, traffic 842,
Leaving
fuel pop is
altitude.
4.5 east of the field, RNAV 27, circle.
So the missed approach has me up to 3,000 feet, so I have the 3,000 set for my missed approach procedure.
337, we're going to be going missed on the approach here, so we'll keep it nice and slow. You should be okay to land in front of us.
Thank you, 337.
Approaching minimums.
Lewis, traffic size 60337, on final.
200 feet above minimums.
Switch fuel tank.
500.
Minimums.
Minimums, if the runway's not in sight, going around.
Autopilot
Gonna
mode.
pitch for 1,000 feet per minute. I just adjusted that.
714 Uniform Foxtrot.
And I'll just add power to what I need.
Landing on runway 09, Gal traffic.
Papa Grove traffic 800 Mike Fox, that's over the top of the field at a 1,600, climbing to 3,000, Papa Grove.
Traffic, side 6
That's on this approach, I'll activate it, I'll hit nav.
Autopilot.
Runway
Low.
9, Golf.
Aircraft is now going to
traffic. Falcon Jet now is about
fly
half
the
a
missed
mile
approach
to the
procedure.
east of the field will be a crosswind to a left downwind entry, runway 9er, Lewis.
Lewis traffic, Sky 220 Quebec, breaking out the RNAV, runway 9, going to be departed to the southwest. We'll be looking for 80 X-ray. Lewis. Golf traffic, Cessna 152 Hotel Fox, turning downwind, runway 9, full stop, Golf.
I just add power to keep whatever airspeed I want, indicated airspeed. Autopilot's doing 1,000 feet per minute climb. And I just adjust power to adjust what speed I want. I'm just going to climb at 120. Indicated knots. No need to go super fast. Again, this is going to turn all the way around to the right and go directly to Vintage intersection to enter the hold.
Altitude.
At Lewis traffic, Falcon Jet's joining the left downwind runway 09er at Lewis.
Yeah, I like that procedure, I think a little better. I'm just going to hold around 120 knots on final from the final approach fix down, because I can slow pretty fast. That's funny, slow fast. Slow down rapidly and put the flaps in if I see the runway. So when you get down to the minimums or the lowest altitude that the chart allows for, in this case this chart allows us to go down 1,380 feet MSL, mean sea level or mean sea altitude.
Lewis traffic 220, expect part of the traffic pattern southwestbound, Lewis.
At that point, you get down to that altitude. If you don't see the runway, you're doing a missed approach. And then, if you do see the runway, then you can continue on and land. So the instrument approach is assuming you're in the clouds, you can't see the runway. I'm doing everything by looking at all of my instruments. And
Golf traffic, Cessna 152 Hotel Fox, turning final for runway 9.
once you get to those minimums, you either make a decision that you hit the minimums and you're landing, minimums continuing if you were to see approach lights, if it had approach light system, or minimums you're going around.
6180
And so I just practice doing a go around.
Golf traffic.
So this is just going to take us out to the Vintage intersection and do a parallel entry to the hold.
Departing runway 12, Poplar Grove. Lewis traffic.
Lewis traffic, Skyhawk 205 Sierra, crossing runway 9er in Lewis. Yeah, Eagle Creek Aviation, King Air 9042 Charlie Echo. Lewis traffic, Skyhawk
It's an MSA, which is minimum safe altitude. Two different things. MSL, mean sea level, that's the altitude above sea level. And that's what we're looking at on our instrumentation, based off of aircraft instruments. Above the ground, again, it's 523 feet above the ground, which is where my minimums for this particular approach would be. So it gets you down to 500 feet, so you can imagine you're in the clouds, not seeing anything outside your windows, all the way down to your 523 feet above the ground, and the cloud layer, say the bottom was right there, you would break out, see the runway, you can land. If you don't see the runway, then you have to execute a missed approach.
Going northbound, didn't see 80 X-ray there on the downwind, and we'll re-enter the 45. Lewis, 6180 X-ray. Departing to the east, Gulf traffic.
So this is going to take us out to the vintage intersection. It's going to do a parallel entry, which is one of 3 types of entries into a holding pattern. And then on this screen, you'll see the racetrack there. I'm going to cross it in one direction, and then I'm going to come back to that and do this holding pattern around that intersection. Send this map.
Lewis, traffic stock 6180 X-ray on, fire off runway 9, Lewis traffic. Traffic, Skyhawk 205, 4 Sierra, entering the left downwind from 1.
So we cross vintage intersection, and now it's entering the parallel entry. So we'll go out here for a little bit, and then it'll make a left-hand turn to go correct back to that vintage intersection.
Go traffic, Skyhawk.
And then enter that holding pattern.
To the northwest, we're gonna go midfield at 2,500 for a simulated engine failure. Any other traffic, please advise. Call traffic.